Hi everyone, and welcome to every episode of The Simpsons Season 26 Reviewed. I'm not going to waste any time today, as there's nothing special to report regarding this season, and I have never seen it before, so let's just get into it straight away. After I say a thank you to The Simpsons wiki, and kindly ask you guys to like and subscribe, that is. And if all that's done, then let's proceed. Season 26, Episode 1, Clown in the Dumps. Krusty the Clown retires heartbroken because his father dies before telling him whether or not he finds him funny. Meanwhile, Lisa tries to protect Homer from getting ill or injured. So my trivia here is that The Simpsons Guy, a Simpsons Family Guy crossover, aired the same day as this episode. And I did think about covering it for this video, but at the end of the day, it is officially a Family Guy episode, so I didn't think including it here would be that prudent. You'll just have to wait until I get around to reviewing Family Guy to see my thoughts on that. And my best moment was seeing the different bits Krusty did over his 50-year career. The season opener gets a 1 out of 5, so I will admit that this episode rubbed me up the wrong way for so many reasons. And that started before the episode even aired. At the time, they hyped up this season premiere like it was going to be this big deal, like a major character was going to be killed off. And then of course, they didn't actually have the balls to do this, so they killed off Krusty's dad, who is basically an irrelevance on the show. To say that was a damp squib is an understatement. And given the advertising for this episode, it was a straight up lie. Even looking past that though, the actual episode was not good. It was on the short side because it had a long freaky couch gag, which I did not particularly like, and not much actually happens when you think about it. Sure, Krusty's dad dies, but they go down the cliche route of him retiring and worrying about whether his dad thought he was funny or not. It all came across as very shallow, and this was all confirmed when things pretty much go back to normal in the end. Given the main plot line and Lisa's story about being scared of losing her father, they could have worked in some good moments here about dealing with loss and such. I would have been fully on board with that because, well, whatever, I'll just tell you guys. I have actually lost my dad. He passed away when I was only 14, and of course that was a tough thing to deal with, but you do learn certain things when going through something like that. Things about yourself, your perspective on life, your family, etc. I'm sure that anyone who has lost someone close to them would say the same. That kind of makes this episode even more disappointing on a personal level for me, as they could have tried to dive into the grieving process and the best way to deal with it. And like I said, they could have given us some life lessons from that. A positive message to end on would have been nice. Instead though, all Lisa's story boiled down to was her apparently wanting to feel some control. That felt like a very odd ending, and if anything felt like it was treating this topic with a bit of disrespect. Anyway, I hope you're all okay with my personal anecdote here, guys. I only shared it because I think it's relevant to this episode. I really didn't like this one. Season 26, Episode 2, The Wreck of the Relationship. After Homer and Bart get into an argument, Marge sends the two on the relationship to resolve their issues. While Homer is away, he puts Marge in charge of his fantasy football league. So my trivia here is that the Fatal Nard Crush video is a reference to the Nickelodeon original movie, Jinxed. And my best moment was Marge winning with Homer's fantasy football team. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. The story here was simple and yes, a bit predictable, but it still succeeded at the main thing it tried to do, which was get Bart and Homer on the same page. Their battle over broccoli at the start was so petty that I actually found it endearing in a way. Don't ask how that works. The bits on the ship were not amazing, but again, they did the job. Seeing Bart finally eat the broccoli at the end, which allows him and Homer to finally trust and respect each other a bit, was a nice ending. I also enjoyed Marge's small fantasy football side plot. It was nice to see her take it to the men in the town and actually win it for Homer. The observation that it's all mostly luck, I also found funny. As someone who has done a few fantasy football teams in the past, I can confirm that luck is a huge part of it. Overall, I found this to be a solid but not spectacular episode. Season 26, Episode 3, Super Franchise Me. Marge opens a sandwich franchise store after her sandwiches are a huge success at Springfield Elementary School. However, another store soon opens across the street. So my trivia for this one is that the scene where Bart spills hot coffee on Homer parodies a McDonald's lawsuit where Stella Liebeck was awarded $2.9 million when she suffered third-degree burns after accidentally spilling coffee in her lap. And my best moment was the Simpson family making the restaurant a success. This one gets a 3 out of 5. I don't have much to say here really. I mean, it was a solid enough episode, just without having anything much new to analyse. Marge getting involved in the food business is nothing new, but they at least played around with it by getting different characters involved. Most of those scenes work, but the scenes with the family running it were the best for me. The other store across the street was quite a bland conflict really, but hey, it did give a reason for Marge and Homer to cut their losses with the help of Moe. There were a few decent jokes and moments too, like Ned's line about his energy running at a higher power than even he believes in, or a drone service Homer invents for Lenny, which is just a sandwich attached to a balloon. It was also a nice change to have no B-plot, as it allowed the main one to actually fully try and tell its story. Season 26, Episode 4, Treehouse of Horror 25. The 3 short stories this year are School is Hell, A Clockwork Yellow, and The Others. So this is the second episode of the series where Homer is voiced by 2 people. The first time it happened was in Homer's Barbershop Quartet, and my best moment was the ending photo of the 2 Simpson families. This year's Treehouse of Horror gets a 3 out of 5. The first story here was simple, but it didn't exactly need to be complex. I like how enthusiastic Bart is about hell, and it's nice to see him be so successful there. There was also the odd decent moments like the portal with Mr. Burns, or the hell version of Chalmers saying skin him instead of scared her. A Clockwork Yellow on the other hand didn't click with me. It felt like they tried to parody a lot of things at once, and it never really meshed together. I wish the editing guy at the end really did scrap it and start over. The final part goes some way to making up for the mediocre second though. It was a nice little idea to have the current Simpsons clash with the ghosts of their past selves. It also felt appropriate given that this is the 25th Treehouse of Horror episode. I think they managed to show off the subtle differences in personality between the characters back in the Tracy Ullman days and the way they are today. They also threw in some nice references, like frosty chocolate milkshakes and Dr. Marvin Monroe's appearance. I like how they acknowledge the mystery of whether he is actually dead or not. As I said though, my favourite one was a family photo at the end. It was a nice callback to the old classic. Overall, I did enjoy this year's Halloween episode. However, the second segment let it down a bit, and there could have been a few more jokes mixed in. These things keep it from being a 4. Season 26, Episode 5, Opposites A-Frack. Lisa brings in Assemblywoman Maxine Lombard to thwart Mr. Burns' fracking, while the two find themselves attracted to one another. So my trivia for this one is that the original title for this episode was going to be Fracking Day, of course in reference to the episode Whacking Day, and my best moment was Patty and Selma trying to stop smoking. This one is a 2 out of 5. Some may like this more than me, but I couldn't really get into this. I think it tried to do too much, because between the danger of the fracking and the fire water, Homer's moral dilemma, and Burns' crazy affair with this liberal politician, I never knew which story I was supposed to care about more. I was actually getting more enjoyment out of the start of the episode, with Homer's petty bickering with Patty and Selma, and then failing miserably to stop smoking. Once the main portion of the episode came though, things got worse in my opinion. Along with the issue of it being too cluttered, it also had no real jokes or message, and the ending was a bit abrupt. At least the characters were all in character for the most part, so I can't truly hate this episode. It was just a bit lackluster for me, that's all. Season 26, Episode 6, Simpsorama. Bender and the Planet Express crew travel through time in order to stop destructive creatures which have Bart's DNA. So my trivia here is that Bender says kill all humans in his sleep, which was a reference to the Futurama episode I Roommate. And my best moment here was Marge meeting Leela. The long-awaited crossover between these two shows gets a 4 out of 5. I guess this was very much the year for Simpsons crossovers. However, unlike the Family Guy one, I can cover this one, as this is officially a Simpsons episode. I enjoyed this episode without being blown away by how amazingly funny it was, or what clever things they did with the story. They kept the plot simple. Something Bart does in the present day affects the world in the future, which leads to the Futurama crew having to come back in time to stop it. It was always going to take a concept like that to bring these two shows together, so I am fine with it. They set it up well enough with the time capsule and the radiation, and they pay it off well enough by travelling to the future to take out all of Bart's mutant offspring. What made the episode work for me was more the intangibles. The vibe of these characters playing off each other just felt right. I think the writers deserve credit for that, as they allowed the scenes to breathe and just let the characters talk it out at times. Whether it be Homer at Moe's with Bender, or Bender taking Maggie to the races and forming a bond with her. It was also good to see the scientists of the two shows interact. Of course, they were never going to fully showcase every character in the time they had, but they did pick and choose quite well by showing the interactions we would most like to see. The jokes also were mostly character driven. There was numerous ones involving Bender doing robot things, and my personal favourite, the one between Marge and Leela, about their respective eye and hair. So yeah, this was a highly anticipated episode, and one which we absolutely needed to see at some point, and it was mostly worthwhile. Just a simple episode which understood the characters of both shows, and used them as a crutch. Season 26, Episode 7, Blazed and Confused. The 4th grade class has a new teacher, Mr. Lassen, who is a terrible bully. So Bart and Milhouse join forces to take him down. To do this, they have to make a trip to a festival called Blazing Guy. So my trivia here is that the episode title is a pun on the 1993 film Dazed and Confused. My best moment was Bart's hair growing back like Homer's. List 1 gets a 3 out of 5. This was a fairly unique episode, so maybe I'm giving it extra credit for that. But I still found this to be a decent if uneven episode. The first half I enjoyed more. This psychopath type teacher was a genuinely menacing presence, as he messes with the kids, and it gives Bart something real to go up against. Despite that serious premise though, the episode seemed pretty chill about it. It had no problem having slow conversations between the characters. I mean, the scene at dinner where the family discusses Bart's haircut went on for almost 2.5 minutes. Normally I would call this boring, but I think this episode mostly got away with it, mainly because there was an actual threat waiting in the wings. The second half at this weird ritual festival was rather trippy, quite literally for Marge. I did not like this section that much, but it was not terrible, and it did provide Bart a way to get revenge on the teacher. This was not the funniest episode, but there were a few decent moments. I enjoyed the teacher toying with Nelson throughout the episode, and as I said, Bart's discussion with Milhouse about his hair looking like Homer's was good. Milhouse's line of him being lucky to look like his mom got a laugh out of me. It was about time they made a decent joke about his parents looking alike again. Season 26, Episode 8, Covercraft. Homer has a midlife crisis and forms a cover band with some of the other dads in town, but the band's early success is soon overwhelmed by the breakout potential of Apu. So my trivia here is that Sanjay's in this episode, and he has his first speaking role since season 10's I'm with Cupid, and my best moment was the ending. List 1 got a 3 out of 5 from me. This was a light-hearted enough episode that manages to turn a potential Homer midlife crisis into a cover rock band. Very much like the first few episodes, this did the simple things well, with the characters all acting like they should and adding to the story. Apu being able to sing at such a good level is a bit unrealistic for sure, but hey, the way he learned to do so by listening to songs non-stop in the Quickie Mart is exactly the kind of thing that I can believe in the context of the show. The final act conflict of Homer trying to sabotage Apu was not quite as good though, and I would have liked it if more was done with Apu's time in his professional band. The ending of Covercraft actually being able to perform together in front of this large audience was nice to see. Even if they did get arrested in the end, it was just cool to see them live out their passion in such a way. As far as the jokes go, they were average I would say. The scrap between Moe and King Toot to start off the episode was decent, and Bart and Lisa's awkward reaction to Marge's dancing also made me grin. Season 26, Episode 9, I Won't Be Home for Christmas. Marge kicks Homer out of the house, after Moe convinces him to stay out all night on Christmas Eve. Depressed, Homer takes a lonely walk through Springfield, instead of being with his family on Christmas. My information about this one is that Cosmic Wars Holiday Special is a parody of the Star Wars Holiday Special, and my best moment was the family looking for Homer in a neon sign store. This one gets another 3 out of 5. This was very warm and cuddly, quite literally, like the writers went out of their way to make the characters, especially Homer, likeable. I mean, they even bring up the whole jerk-ass thing themselves. They really committed to this tone, and it turned out to be the right thing to do, because there were some genuine character moments to be found here, like the scene Homer had with Ned. It was nice to see Ned be willing to open up a bit about his losses, and Homer was very supportive of that. That 30-second scene had more impact than any in the season opener which was meant to be devoted to this topic. there was also some nice stuff about the family, and how they have to act around Christmas time. The Homer and Marge row was nothing new, and that side of the plot kind of got lost in the middle of the episode. The ending was a happy one, but the build-up never really felt good enough for me to really get the feels from it. As far as the comedy here, I did find a Screw the Audience joke about the science store to be genuinely funny. It kind of caught me off guard as well. Bart remembering screw-ups from Christmas a few years ago was also decent. In the end, this was a nice episode, but it doesn't ever shift into that higher gear to get a 4. Season 26, Episode 10, The Man Who Came to Be Dinner. The Simpsons go to a theme park where the lines for the rides are horrible. Except for one called Rocket to Your Doom. It takes them to the home planet of Kang and Kodos, where the inhabitants try to eat them. So, the potato chip scene from Deep Space Homer is repeated here, except this time, Bart and Maggie keep eating them. My best moment here was the opening scenes at the theme park. This one is a 2 out of 5. It was strange to see Kang and Kodo star in an episode which wasn't a Treehouse of Horror. I'm not against it in principle. As ever, it comes down to the execution of it. Once they actually got to the alien planet, they never managed to hold my interest. At first I thought it would be about the family being trapped in this sort of zoo, but then it quickly changed into them being eaten. That was a very cliché way to go, and I don't think they added anything new or interesting. That is what ultimately let this down, because I did enjoy some of the animation on Rigel 7, as well as a Disneyland parody at the start. There were a few relatable jokes in there. However, the last third of this episode left me feeling a bit bored and jaded. It felt like an average Treehouse of Horror segment, just stretched out for twice as long. I could see this being quite a polarizing episode, as some new things were tried, and there were some good parts of it. However, in the end I could not help feeling a bit disappointed with what was served up. Season 26, Episode 11, Bart's New Friend. Homer is hypnotized into thinking he is 10 years old, and starts enjoying spending time with Bart. My trivia for this one is that Lisa performs the song Baker Street on her saxophone for Homer. She previously played this song in Lisa's Sax. And my best moment here was Homer singing along with Lisa playing the sax. This one gets a 4 out of 5. So the concept of this was pretty shaky on paper, with hypnotism being used to make Homer think he is 10 years old again. The first half even reuses some old scenarios to get us to that point, like the trip to the circus for example. What makes this work for me above all else is just Homer having a good time with his kids. Especially with Bart, it felt like the shackles were off. The two could finally let the awkwardness of their father-son relationship go, and just let their natural fun personalities play off each other. It's quite hard to tell serious stories involving Homer and Bart in my opinion, so them just hanging around together, enjoying the simple things in life, is about as authentic as these two are ever going to get with each other. Despite the Homer and Bart stuff being good, the one scene Homer has with Lisa almost steals the show. It is so fun how he's finally able to embrace her music, and do a duet with her in his own unique way. The ending was also nice, the way he and Bart can still have a new respect for each other, even after he goes back to normal. The bit with Marge was also sweet, and it fully confirmed that normality was restored. As far as the jokes go, there were a few small ones I liked, even if the episode was not a laugh riot. Homer breaking the guy's long fingernails, or Lenny and Coral being glad that the guy came out of retirement to cover for the new childlike Homer. This was just a fun, breezy watch that also managed to show off Bart and Homer's relationship in a different light. Season 26, Episode 12, The Musk Who Fell to Earth. When Elon Musk lands in Springfield, he and Homer become friends, and set out to revolutionize the town's nuclear power plant. So, when Bart turns off autopilot in the electric car, the steering wheel folds out in the same way as in the 1993 film Demolition Man, and my best moment was Mr. Burns releasing the hounds on Smithers. This one is a 1 out of 5. This definitely falls into the same trap as Lisa Goes Gaga, in that it elevates a guest star above the show and sacrifices any sense of organic comedy in favour of showing off the celebrity. Now, whether or not you believe that Elon Musk deserves that treatment any more than Lady Gaga, I will let you debate amongst yourselves. In certain ways, I would argue that Musk fits the show even less than Gaga. Now, I'm sure you guys have noticed that I'm not the most expressive person in the world. I have quite a monotone, dry voice. But as bad an actor as I would make, I think even I would do a better job than Elon Musk. Every time he talked, it just felt so off. He has no charisma, so you don't feel any need to care about him. Maybe the show expects the fact that he is one of the richest people on earth is enough. to get that attention by itself, but that just doesn't do it for me. Ultimately though, it doesn't matter how famous or well fitted the celebrity is to the show, when you elevate them above the show, it's completely unacceptable for a Simpsons episode. As far as what actually goes on in the episode, well, there isn't much going on. Homer hangs around with Musk a bit, and Musk works with Mr. Burns. It all leads to an incredibly underwhelming ending, where Burns tries to have Elon assassinated. As far as the jokes go, hardly any were found, and certainly none that made me laugh. Burns calling the hounds on Smithers, after Smithers reminded him that that was an option, was the closest we came to a decent one. This was just a shocker really, arguably even worse than a season opener. Season 26, Episode 13, Walking Big and Tall. Marge tries to get Homer to lose weight, but instead, he finds a support group that encourages him to embrace his size. My trivia here is that Ned Flanders appears as a child at the same time as Homer and Marge. However, he is usually shown to be 60 years of age. The best thing in the episode for me was the flashbacks of the previous decades of town hall meetings. This one gets a 3 out of 5. This felt almost like an episode of 2 parts. I mean, Homer's weight was the main one, but the bits about Springfield's anthem went on for so long that you could be forgiven for mistaking that as the main one. I am not complaining though, as those scenes were the best in the episode. I have always quite liked Springfield-centric plots, so seeing the entire town so enthusiastic about this song was a nice touch. It was also interesting to learn that Hans Moleman was the town's old mayor. That is about the most backstory we are ever going to get about him. And as I said, that little montage of the different generations of Springfieldians singing a song was very nice. Homer joining this fat positivity type movement was not quite as good, but also not bad. Homer's morality was not really believable either way, and the ending seemed a bit wishy-washy given that Marge was so desperate for Homer to lose weight. I suppose there was some decent satire in there about these body positivity movements though, that are becoming all the more common nowadays. Sure, it is good to be confident with who you are, but at the end of the day you can't ignore the reality that being fat is unhealthy. That's just the way it is. As far as the jokes go, they were decent, which makes this episode a solid 3. I liked Marge flipping the newspaper so Homer did not have to see it, as well as Mr. Burns using the trapdoor on the squeaky voiced teen. Season 26, Episode 14, My Fair Lady. Fed up with chauffeuring her children around, Marge starts working for a transportation app service. Meanwhile, Homer bankrupts Moe, forcing him to work as a janitor at a power plant. Something to note about this episode is that Bart does appear, but does not have any lines. And my best moment was Marge's rush to get to all of her locations. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I found this to be quite solid. Both plots had their moments, and they came together well in the end. To talk about them individually, it was nice to see Moe trying to move himself up in the world, and some of the arguments he had with Homer, Lenny and Carl felt quite natural. You could argue that maybe the way he moved from job to job was a bit rushed, but I was finding his journey so fun that I didn't really care. As far as the Marge stuff goes, that was probably even better. I like the scenes of Marge driving people about, whether it be her skill in getting to all of the locations on time, or putting up with everyone's stories. She really was determined here, and a determined, motivated Marge is always a Marge I'm interested in seeing. There was also some satire about Uber here too. It was fairly obvious stuff, but still true enough, so it did add to the episode. And I did also enjoy the ending with the car ride between Marge and Moe. It was nice to see them recognise each other's unhappiness, and they talked themselves into quitting their new jobs to fix it. It was a rare nice moment between those two. This is on the low end of a 4 because it's not that funny, but I did enjoy most of the story, and there were a few of Moe's lines which were quite snappy. Season 26, Episode 15, The Princess Guide. A Nigerian princess named Kemi comes to Springfield, as her father tries to get a uranium deal with Mr. Burns. Homer is chosen to protect her, but loses her after she goes exploring the town with Moe. The title of this episode is a parody of the 1987 romantic comedy film, The Princess Bride, and my best moment was Homer trading in a cafeteria to get a meal for Lisa. This one gets a 3 out of 5. This episode was very typical of this season. A plot that gets by having some level of intrigue, but never does anything to blow you away. The opening parts of this were probably my favourite, with the bring your daughter to work day at the plant. It was a nice joke how Homer could not answer any of Lisa's questions, except the one about how many ice cream flavours there were. Of course he would know the answer to that. And as I said, I also liked how Homer negotiated his way into some food. It is truly amazing what he can do when food is on the line. The first act also sets up Burns' deal with the Nigerian guy. Smithers trying to sabotage the deal by picking Homer to watch over the princess also made some sense, given that he wanted to sail away with Burns into the sunset. Moe's friendship with the princess was okay, but also felt like a rehash of old Moe stories. I thought the bit about Moe falling for the obvious Nigerian prince internet scam was quite realistic though. Again, that's something I could imagine him doing. Things would of course end with the guy forgiving his daughter, and Smithers' plan being foiled. At least it was a somewhat happy ending for Moe though. Season 26, Episode 16, Sky Police. Chief Wiggum is delivered a jetpack, which he uses in order to fight crime, but when he crashes it into the church, the congregation resort to counting cards in order to get the money for repairs. My trivia about this one is that when the church gets replaced by the atheist strip club, the billboard advertises Crystal Hitchens. This is a reference to Christopher Hitchens. And my best moment was Chief Wiggum with the jetpack. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed this episode. It was nothing to take too serious, but as a quickfire plot to have fun with, it worked very well. The intro with Chief Wiggum getting a jetpack of all things was a bit crazy, but his incompetence at using it made it all worthwhile. It also gave the title to this episode, so it did serve some purpose, hey? They even reference it again later on by referring to God as a Sky Police. It also leads into the main portion of the episode, which is about the church crew trying to earn the money required to rebuild the church after the jetpack set it on fire. The whole card counting thing worked for me just because the people doing it are the last ones you would expect. It is interesting seeing Ned and Marge in particular grapple with the morality of gambling. They justify it to themselves by saying that card counting is math, not gambling, which is a fair enough distinction to make, I suppose. I guess that reassurance was especially needed for Marge, so that she did not have a relapse back into her gambling addiction. Anyway, it works out in the end for all involved, despite Homer managing to get himself held hostage by the casino. The jokes here were also pretty good. I liked Homer's over-the-top interest in the review, much to the annoyance of Marge trying to keep it a secret. The bizarre, quirky taste of Reverend and Helen Lovejoy with their new clothes also stood out. A very enjoyable one overall. Season 26, Episode 17, Waiting for Duffman. When Duffman undergoes hip replacement surgery and retires, the company set up a competition to find his replacement. Homer wins the competition, but learns that the job requires him to stay sober. So, the end credits here include a clip of Sam Simon describing his work, with a thank you to him. This is because Simon died a week prior on March 8, 2015. And my best moment was the Game of Thrones intro for Homer as Duffman. This one gets a 3 out of 5. This was a simple episode that was okay without doing anything special. Again, sounding quite familiar for this season. I do at least appreciate that this didn't try to be anything it wasn't. Even through Homer's realization that beer has its negatives, they never tried to make things too emotional. That would just not work in this context. After all, Homer as Duffman is a very rowdy concept, so the episode did the right thing to try and run with that. I think it was quite fun to see Homer embrace being Duffman. It is probably a dream job for him after all. The ending was not the best, but hey. Of course, things had to go back to normal in the end, even if the original Duffman, Howard, recovered a bit quick. There were a few jokes I liked here, such as a neon sign being the only thing lighting Moe's bar, or a t-shirt cannon that hit a picture of Maud in Ned's bedroom. Talk about rubbing salt into the wound there. As I said though, the Game of Thrones bit was my favourite. Much like the couch gag from a few seasons ago, it was well done. Overall, this was a very watchable episode, but not one which leaves a lasting impact. Season 26, Episode 18, Peeping Mom. Bart lies about his involvement in a bulldozer crash, so Marge follows him everywhere until he tells the truth. Meanwhile, Ned gets a new dog, which seems to prefer Homer over him. So my trivia here is that when Milhouse says the definition of thigh, after looking it up on his phone, the definition he gives is identical to the one on Google. So at least they got that detail right, and my best moment was Homer and Lisa mumbling to each other. This one gets a 3 out of 5. The Despite this being a fairly simple story on paper, the way the episode was structured meant that it never really worked out that way. It was very non-linear, and seemed to always throw new things in at every turn. It is mostly just Marge following Bart around, but there is also a subplot about Ned getting a new dog which likes Homer more. They even throw in a bit of Lisa stuff, with her feeling left out with all the attention on Bart. I think it does try to do too much at times, as it leaves the endings to all of the stories lacking. Don't get me wrong, some of the Marge and Bart interactions here were nice, as we don't get to see that often on the show, but the ending with the Springfield sign was kind of silly. Likewise, the bit with Flanders getting a new dog was quite charming. However, the ending where Homer gives the dog back to Flanders was not that convincing. I mean, the dog did still clearly prefer Homer after all. The scene with Homer and Lisa is my favourite in the episode. It again has some charm to it with how petty Lisa was. It's one of the rare instances in the HD era where she actually acts like a kid, and Homer winning her over by copying her muttering was pretty fitting. Despite some flaky conclusions to the stories, Liz still gets a 3 due to some feel-good moments which leave a nice impression. Season 26, Episode 19. The Kids Are All Fight. When Homer gets an old film role developed, the family takes a trip down memory lane to see how Bart and Lisa first started to get along better. So in the episode, Mo asks Marge if she wanted the Matty finish. And if you were looking closely, you would have seen Latty Len signed one of the photos with Matt Groening's signature. And my best moment was Selma working as a sidekick. This episode gets another 3 out of 5. Latter rating is very plentiful this season. This was an episode which took place at Moe's but was mostly told in flashback. The scenes at Moe's were good framing scenes, as it was nice to cut back to the family just hanging out in a bar from time to time. As far as the flashback itself goes, it felt like they were going for a classic era type of story. I mean, it kind of captured that tone, but was just not as good. The actual meat of the story was just Bart and Lisa fighting and arguing. That is resolved pretty quickly with the therapist, by them simply saying that Lisa is good and Bart is bad. That hardly sounds like expert analysis, but there we go. Most of the time is actually spent on Bart and Lisa getting lost after being left with Ned's grandmother. Some of the moments of them defending each other were quite cute, but I'm not sure that they needed to be this age for this to be a thing. Most of the time they acted just like the 8 and 10-year-old versions of Bart and Lisa, so the flashback plot started to feel a bit redundant. The episode was watchable all the way through, and was never annoying, but it also never added anything to Bart and Lisa's relationship, which was not already implied. It was also not greatly funny, but I did like the gag of Selma being a make-do sidekick, and her advice to Marge that everything was Homer's fault. She probably didn't do any worse than most people claiming to be a psychic though, let's be honest. Season 26, Episode 20. Let's Go Fly a Coot. The Simpsons learn about Grandpa's stories in the Air Force. Also, in order to impress Milhouse's Dutch cousin, Bart starts to smoke electronic cigarettes. My trivia for this one is that the title here is a reference to Let's Go Fly a Kite, a song in Walt Disney's 1964 film, Mary Poppins. And my best moment was Homer's high-pitched voice after sucking the helium out of the balloons. This one is a 1 out of 5. From the very first scenes, this episode never really clicked with me. Homer getting in trouble with this apparent secret birthday please was dumb, as was the party he had to throw for Rod. I mean, who came up with the money for that? Whether it was Homer himself or the group forcing him to do it, it was stupid either way. From there, we have the rather bizarre transition into a Grandpa and Homer story, where these war veterans go out of their way to treat Homer like crap as some kind of revenge for the way he treats Abe. None of that was nice to watch. Then we got this flashback which I was hardly paying attention to, if I'm honest, but it did reveal how Abe met Mona. It was pretty depressing though really, so I don't want to go into it much. And oh, I forgot to mention, Bart was crushing on Milhouse's teenage cousin from Holland during all of this. That was pointless and again came to nothing. Other than another incest joke about the Van Houtens that is. Nothing here had any kind of satisfying conclusion. It was not at all cohesive and all felt incredibly pointless. Homer had some okay moments with the party shenanigans, like my best moment, but it's not enough to save this from being a 1. Season 26, Episode 21, Bull E. After Bart gets bullied at the school dance, Marge convinces the town to pass anti-bullying legislation. Homer then gets arrested and sent to rehab for bullying Ned, only to subsequently leave rehab as a hero. So my trivia here is that this episode has the same name as the villain in an episode of The Fairly Odd Parents, called The Big Superhero Wish, and my best moment was the ending. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. This was a solid episode that used the bully angle in Act 1 to set up a Homer and Flanders story for the end. Along the way we had some decent social commentary about how government and police powers can be abused, as well as a few funny moments here and there. I especially enjoyed the Thomas the Tank Engine one, as well as Otto's trippy fantasies about the school bus. We were also mercifully spared another Bart and a girl story, as I feared that was where the school dance was going. The best bits here though was the Homer and Ned stuff. I like how Rod and Todd actually noticed what was going on, and encouraged Ned to stand up to Homer. Lem calling a power-mad Chief Wiggum to lock Homer up also worked well. The final act of Homer reforming himself worked because it was treated so earnestly. Honestly, this was low-key one of the most overly nice endings in the show's history. Homer literally gets down on his knees and begs for forgiveness, and Len invites Ned into his house as a genuine friend. I expected there to be some kind of joke to cut the treacle, but no, they really went all in with Homer being this nice fellow who saw the error of his previous ways. I think it worked in this particular circumstance because it's just so rare on the show. Almost like the writers were trying to apologise for all the jerk-ass Homer in the past. Now all of that is well and good, but I would not want to get this all the time. Homer as a character needs at least some edge to work, and The Simpsons as a show needs to have a cynical nature to work well. That's at least my opinion on it anyway. I'm actually interested if you guys agree with me about that or not. Anyway, as I said, on this occasion, they pulled it off well enough, and I enjoyed watching this one. Season 26, Episode 22, Mathlete's Feet. With help from groundskeeper Willie, Lisa finds a way for the Springfield Elementary Math Olympics team to finally win against Waverly Hills Elementary. So my trivia about this one is that the song played during the scene that shows the new technology is Year 3000 by Busted, and my best moment was Bart getting the winning solution. So the season finale gets a 3 out of 5. And indeed, this episode kind of sums up the season. It had moderately interesting stuff going on, and the odd good moment, without doing anything to truly stand out. I liked seeing how Homer's old nerd friends are apparently now rich, and they kindly use that money to help the school. However, all the tech the school got didn't end up being the thing which helped them challenge Waverly Hills at the math challenge. Instead, it was just doing practical stuff after the gadgets failed. The ending with Bart being the one to win the competition for them was a bit predictable, but I like how it related to the practical stuff they were learning, and using Homer's M hair to do it was quite clever. As far as the jokes go, they were average. Homer not wanting to wear a hat in case people thought he was bald was a good one. There were a few negatives here though. Things felt a bit on the short side, even with that long Rick and Morty couch gag, and that credit scene with the Simpsons being hillbillies felt out of place. I don't know why they've had a credit sequence in almost every episode this season. Despite these shortcomings though, this was still a satisfactory way to end the season. So that is all of season 26 episodes done, guys. And if you stick around, you will witness my season 26 summary. As you can see, the overall season average score was 2.86. My bottom 5 episodes were The Man Who Came to Dinner at 5, Opposites of Frack at 4, Let's Go Fly a Coot at 3, Clown in the Dumps at 2, and in a very close call, The Musk Who Fell to Earth claims the number 1 spot. It was a bit of a toss-up between number 1 and 2, to be honest. And that's my top 5. There were no 5 rated episodes this year, but there was 5 4 rated ones. And in at number 5 is My Fair Lady, Bull E is 4, Simpsorama at 3, Bart's New Friend at 2, and just about Sky Police is the best of the year. So, season 26, what are my thoughts on it? It was better than I was expecting, but was still obviously not particularly good. It did have the highest average score since season 20 though, so I am happy to take that as a win at this point. If you compare it to the previous 2 seasons especially, I found it to be noticeably easier to get through. I think that is shown by the large amount of 3 rated episodes here. It was over half the season actually. A lot of these episodes were just okay. Not offensive in any way, but also not being amazingly funny or memorable. There are a few big exceptions of course. The worst 2 episodes here are up there with any from the series really, in terms of how bad they are. I don't want to be too negative about this season though, because by HD standards it was decent. And if this was the standard in every season in the HD era, it would be tolerable. Not good, but tolerable. I have noticed in general that episodes with Matt Selman as the main writer tend to be a bit more adventurous, and are not scared to put our tried and tested characters through their paces in new situations. It seems like nowadays, out of everyone on the show, he has the best grasp on how the characters should be. As far as the characters go, I think the season was maybe a little light on Bart and Lisa, but nothing extreme. The only really noticeable character dynamic in this season was Homer and Flanders. There were 2 or 3 different episodes where they had the kind of genuinely emotional conversations that are almost never seen between these characters. Seriously, even after Homer accidentally caused Maud's death, he was not as remorseful as he was at the end of Bull E. It was nice to see Homer being kind to Ned for a change, but I am interested to see if this becomes a trend going forward. I have heard from people that Homer is not as much of a jerk in the newer seasons as he was in the teen ones. As I mentioned in one of the reviews though, that can be a double-edged sword, so I am interested to see how that plays out. That will have to wait for next video though guys, as I am done with this one. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a comment if you have anything to say about Season 26. I am always happy to discuss this show with you. Anyway, take care as always everyone.